I stood on the side of the dusty road near Boca Chica, watching the heat haze rise off the tarmac as we waited for the Starship's static fire. Standing next to me was a young activist, well-dressed, organized, holding a clipboard. He spoke to me with this intense, quiet passion about the delicate ecosystem of the marshlands. He talked about sea turtles and migratory birds with a genuine sense of protectiveness. And, listening to him, you couldn't help but nod. It sounded virtuous. He painted a picture of Earth as this fragile, benevolent mother that demanded our constant, gentle shielding. To him, the launch site wasn't a gateway, it was a wound.
Right.
But then the Raptor engines ignited. A low, thrumming roar began to rattle our chests, a sound of raw, uncontained physics. Most of the crowd looked up, eyes wide, feeling that primal, terrifying pull toward the sky. But I watched him.
He didn't look up.
He didn't look up. He immediately looked down at a decibel meter app on his phone, his face twisting not into awe, but into a sort of smug, bureaucratic satisfaction as the numbers ticked into the red. He wasn't witnessing the pinnacle of human engineering. He was gathering evidence for a lawsuit.
Wow.
As the dust settled and the silence returned, he didn't talk about the future or the stars. He tapped his screen and muttered about regulatory violations and injunctions. That split-second reaction crystallized the war we're actually in. He called it environmental protection, but it felt like something much darker.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he loved the Earth, it was that he was terrified of leaving it. He represented a psychological anchor, a mindset that mistakes the cradle for the entire universe. It made me realize that the biggest threat to our species isn't the harsh radiation of space. It's this death cult of safetyism, the terrifying insistence that humanity must remain an eternal infant, never allowed to pack its bags and move out. Welcome to the deep dive. That moment on the Texas coast, it really provides the perfect frame for our conversation today.
It absolutely does.
We are looking at what feels like the foundational conflict of the 21st century. This war between up and down stagnation versus, multi-planetary expansion. And our mission today is to move immediately from that philosophical conflict to the specific technical, economic, and regulatory friction points that define this modern war.
Exactly. We've brought together a stack of analysis that really digs into the techno-economic feasibility and, maybe more importantly, the strategic implications of building self-sufficient industrial supply chains off-world.
So we're going to unpack the hard data.
The hard data, the chemistry you need, the novel economics that are emerging, and the specific hardware that proves humanity can expand. And we'll put that right alongside the immense governmental and legal resistance that is, actively trying to slow it all down.
And that core tension, the idea that environmental protection, when you push it to an extreme, becomes what one viewpoint calls a death cult of safetyism, that's critical. It's the mindset that trades species resilience for this localized, immediate comfort, mistaking Earth's cradle for the entire universe. So I think we need to start with the cold, hard logic, the mathematical imperative that demands we move out.
Well, when we analyze the current state of human space exploration, we have to be honest and call it what it is. The picnic mission.
The picnic mission. I like that.
Right. Every mission, from the early Apollo trips to the initial landings we're planning for the moon or Mars, is basically a camping trip. We meticulously calculate all the consumables, the water, the food, the pressurized air. We bring everything with us, and we are utterly dependent on a long, thin logistical umbilical cord stretching all the way back to Earth.
And that utter dependence on a single long supply line, that's fundamentally unsettling from a safety standpoint. You're saying it doesn't just make colonization difficult, it's fundamentally unsustainable.
It is, logistically speaking, a planetary-level suicide pact.
Wow, that's a strong term.
It is, but think about it. Imagine any major terrestrial expedition, say an attempt to cross the Antarctic continent. If your entire food and fuel supply had to be launched from a separate continent every month, the logistical failure points are just overwhelming.
Sure, something is bound to go wrong.
Now extend that supply line across 50 million miles of vacuum. It's susceptible to engine failures, launch delays, geopolitical conflicts back on Earth. The analysis is clear. To rely indefinitely on Earth for basic consumables, for air and water, is to embed an existential single point of failure into the very foundation of human civilization.
So we're treating Mars like a weekend trip to a national park.
When we need to be designing it as a permanent industrial residence.
Okay, let's unpack this shift. The goal, therefore, has to pivot from tourism to residence. What's the fundamental differentiator? I mean, what's the technological benchmark that signals we've actually made that leap?
The colonist tears up the supply line entirely. A tourist is focused on initial mass and low Earth orbit, or IMLEO, how efficiently they can pack their resources.
Right.
The colonist, on the other hand, focuses on throughput. They're trying to prove they can manufacture their own fuel, their own air, their own materials locally. And this transition from, highly efficient packing to heavy industrial manufacturing requires one critical thing: massive routine payload capacity.
Which naturally brings us to Starship, the industrial mother machine. This isn't just a bigger rocket, it's an industrial utility.
That is the crucial distinction. When you look at Starship's capacity, it's designed to put somewhere between 150 to 250 metric tons into orbit in a single launch. You have to stop thinking about delicate scientific probes.
Right. You start thinking in bulk.
You start thinking in industrial volume. This capacity is not meant to carry 7 bespoke astronauts and a few high-precision instruments. Its true purpose is to haul the industrial mother machines.
Describe those mother machines. I mean, what does an early Martian or lunar colony need that weighs 200 metric tons?
We're talking about the foundational heavy industry required for an autonomous civilization. This means high-power nuclear reactors or massive solar power plants. It means gigantic industrial drills to extract volatile resources like water ice. It means full-scale chemical reactors capable of sustained high-volume processing.
And foundries, I imagine.
And foundries to convert raw celestial material into finished goods like metal structures or even circuit components. Starship is the key. It's the only way to get the material throughput you need to industrialize the solar system rapidly. Without that heavy lift capability, any off-world presence is doomed to remain a fragile, temporary, and dependent outpost.
It's the difference between sending a scout and sending a full manufacturing base.
Exactly.
And this industrial scale, it demands not just new hardware, but a completely new professional and psychological paradigm. It's not about geology or astronomy anymore, really.
No, it's about systems engineering and chemical manufacturing.
Which leads us to a crucial narrative that really highlights this shift: the perspective of the oxygen farmer.
Right. This narrative centers on a chemical engineer, they call him Elias, who's working on the Sabatier systems down at the Starbase test site. He's not a propulsion specialist. His obsession is the invisible chemistry required to sustain human life in a closed loop.
The oxygen farmer?
Affectionately, perhaps, yeah.
And the material highlights that his drive comes from a really personal, almost counterintuitive place of anxiety, doesn't it?
Precisely. His deepest insight came not from a spreadsheet, but from watching his own kid play in the grass. He realized that the unparalleled complexity and beauty of Earth's biosphere, the very thing he loved, was also, in strategic terms, an unacceptable single point of failure. He actually calculated the biomass required to maintain the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere, and it just dwarfed any engineered system. He recognized that as long as 100% of humanity relies on this single fragile biological pump, the species is existentially vulnerable.
To anything from a supervolcano
to a self-inflicted ecological catastrophe.
Exactly. So his conclusion is that true love for Earth, true environmental stewardship, means preparing to make humanity independent of it.
Yes. It's that accelerationist view. Loving Earth means proving humanity can survive anywhere else. True sustainability isn't just preservation, it's maximizing resilience.
So every test of a carbon capture prototype, every refinement of the chemical reactor.
In his mind, it's building the first truly self-sufficient artificial lung for the species to breathe outside the cradle. He sees his work as fundamentally building the required technological safety net, ensuring that humanity is no longer an infant requiring constant fragile care from one planetary parent.
That's a powerful idea, and it's a perfect philosophical and technical bridge into the chemistry that actually makes this independence possible. That's the perfect transition, because Elias, the oxygen farmer, is dealing directly with in-situ resource utilization, or ISRU.
Right.
This is the technical declaration of independence. We are sending chemical manufacturing plants, not just explorers.
And for a Martian colony, the blueprint for self-sufficiency really boils down to mastering one key chemical process, the Sabatier reaction. We have all the necessary bulk ingredients right there on the planet. They're just not in a usable form.
Okay, so detail that chemistry for us. How does a Martian colony turn the surrounding environment into fuel and air, making the whole thing regenerative?
So the system starts with the Martian atmosphere, which is conveniently about 95% carbon dioxide, CO2.
Right, the stuff we breathe out.
Exactly. You take that CO2 and you combine it with hydrogen, H2, which you do have to bring from Earth initially, but only in small quantities. The key is the reaction itself. CO2 plus H2 produces two absolutely critical outcomes. methane, CH4, and water, H2O.
Methane is rocket fuel, specifically the fuel used by Starship's Raptor engines, which is crucial for the return trip or for moving around the solar system.
That's your ticket home, or your ticket to the asteroid belt.
So what happens to the water?
The water is the ultimate resource. It's gold. You take it and you electrolyze it. You split it apart using solar or nuclear energy into two components: oxygen, O2, which is breathable air for the colonists,
And hydrogen.
and hydrogen, H2. And this is the crucial regenerative loop, that hydrogen is fed back into the initial Sabatier reaction, which reduces the need to constantly import it from Earth.
Ah, so it becomes a self-feeding system.
It means the colony can indefinitely generate fuel, oxygen, and water by relying almost entirely on energy and the Martian atmosphere itself.
So the system is regenerative, but it is definitely not passive. It needs constant, high-quality energy to run those Sabatier reactors and the electrolysis units.
Exactly. And this is why it's so important to emphasize that this isn't just theoretical chemistry. NASA's ISRU technology projects have already successfully integrated functional Sabatier systems, and they've even incorporated a trash-to-gas conversion element.
What does that mean?
It means they're using simulated Martian CO2 mixed with gases released from incinerated mission waste. They're taking the entire waste stream of the human mission waste heat, waste gases, and feeding it back into the manufacturing cycle to produce more methane.
Wow.
This is the metric that separates the fragile visitor from the self-sustaining resident, closing the resource loop, transforming mission liabilities into resources.
And that shift from chemistry to self-sufficiency, that naturally leads us to the economics of all this. Historically, the cost of space exploration has been dominated by mass logistics, IMLEO, initial mass and low Earth orbit. You mentioned this metric is flawed for planning off-world industrialization. Why is that?
The traditional flaw in IMLEO is that it incentivizes lightness and compactness above all else. It encourages systems that are cheap and easy to launch, even if they have short operational lifetimes and low productivity once they arrive.
Which is fine for a picnic.
Fine for a picnic, but terrible if you're planning for a permanent, robust civilization. You need systems that last decades and can be consistently repaired and upgraded. IMLEO costs often miss the total life cycle cost, and crucially, they fail to properly value the enormous early investment required for ISRU.
So we need a metric that captures the true economic basis of survival on a hostile world.
We do. And the analysis we've seen proposes a metric called lifetime embodied energy, or LE.
Okay, lifetime embodied energy.
LE shifts the focus from mass logistics to energy investment. It's a novel, comprehensive, energy-based cost metric specifically designed for human space exploration where autonomy is the goal. I mean, at the end of the day, you're fighting the second law of thermodynamics, which dictates that systems naturally tend toward disorder.
Entropy.
Entropy. Keeping complex systems operating on Mars requires defeating that entropy with high-quality energy.
Why does energy become the objective measure of value in this new environment? I mean, it makes sense, but break it down.
Because on Earth, we take fundamental life support for granted. We breathe air and drink water that nature provides for free, powered by the sun. On Mars, that entire system, your air, your water, your heat, your radiation shielding, your mobility, is dependent on technological systems.
Every single breath requires a machine.
And every machine requires power. Therefore, merely surviving, let alone growing, demands the reliable maintenance of a persistent energy surplus. If you run out of mass, you might slow down. If you run out of power, you die.
Simple as that.
This makes energy efficiency and productivity the most critical economic concerns. LEE tracks the total energy invested in a system over its entire operational lifetime, from the factory floor on Earth, through launch and transport, to decades of operation on the Martian surface.
That makes intuitive sense. You need to value the durability and the productive capacity of a system, not just how light it was when you launched it. But can this energy-based metric still connect back to the traditional cost models that governments and aerospace companies are still using, which are tied to mass?
It absolutely can, and this is where LE proves its utility. It's designed to be robust against disruptive changes, like, for instance, the sudden availability of Starship's cheap, heavy lift capacity. LE can easily be converted back to the traditional IMLEO using a known relationship: the gear ratio.
Tell us more about this gear ratio.
The gear ratio refers to the specific scaling factor required to convert the payload mass you deliver to the Mars surface, the ISRU equipment, the habitats, back to the original mass that had to be launched from Earth's surface. It accounts for all the fuel and infrastructure needed for the journey.
I see.
And crucially, LE uses a specific exchange rate to bridge the energy and mass metrics measured in space logistics mjoules per kilogram.
Oh, okay.
This specialized exchange rate allows mission architects to compare different architectural trade-offs. For instance, is it more energy efficient and cost-effective over a 20-year span to launch a small, light, fragile habitat, or a heavier, more robust, energy-intensive habitat that utilizes massive amounts of local resources?
Right. The lighter one might be cheaper to launch, but the heavier one is cheaper to run for 20 years.
Exactly. LEE provides a transparent, fundamental metric for maximizing sustainable growth. It confirms that energy, not just initial mass, forms the objective theory of value in the space economy.
The moment you introduce self-sufficiency and a new economic theory of value, the stakes immediately shift from scientific curiosity to, well, to geopolitical strategy. And this leads us to the anxieties that are captured in this narrative of the analyst's map.
Yeah, this narrative concerns a strategic analyst who spent decades focused on traditional terrestrial concerns, the flow of oil through maritime routes, the stability of key national interests in specific regions. Suddenly, that map has become obsolete.
Their new map is different.
Their new map tracks orbital mechanics, cislunar resource deposits, and the trajectory of heavy lift systems like Starship.
And the cold realization for this analyst is that the old system of control, the international treaties and space laws written back when space was prohibitively expensive, are rapidly becoming meaningless. They are, as the analysis puts it, paper shields.
The primary threat that generates this geopolitical anxiety is logistical independence. The fear is this: if a rival power, whether it's state-sponsored or commercial, achieves the ability to build massive, heavy industry in orbit, on the moon or on Mars, without needing to lift materials out of Earth's deep gravity well,
then the tools of terrestrial control become irrelevant.
Completely.
Meaning, if Nation A starts mining the moon and building satellites or fuel depots there, how does Nation B impose sanctions? You can't block a shipping lane that runs between the Earth and the moon.
Exactly. Terrestrial sanctions, trade blockades, control over strategic global resources like rare earth metals. All of these traditional levers of power become moot. The driving fear is the prospect of waking up one morning to find that the entire economic ceiling of the planet has been claimed, industrialized, and secured by others, leaving your own nation perpetually trapped in the gravity well, competing for finite, dwindling resources back home.
And that anxiety is now a potent, powerful driver for national acceleration in space technology.
Absolutely.
And resource independence starts with the most critical multi-use commodity in space, which ties directly back to the chemistry we just discussed.
Water. Water is rapidly establishing itself as the primary space currency because it serves three critical functions: life support, radiation shielding, and most importantly, propellant.
And this isn't theoretical. This is based on hard economic modeling.
Yeah, from groups like the Colorado School of Mines, in conjunction with organizations like the United Launch Alliance, ULA, they're focusing specifically on the water-based propellant market in cislunar space. That's the volume of space between Earth and the moon.
So they have actual specific price points for water-based propellant, which reveals the economic architecture of the coming space infrastructure. Give us those analyst notes. What are the numbers?
ULA's detailed analysis provides key figures that establish a genuine market value for in-space refueling. They project that they would be willing to pay approximately $3,000 per kilogram for propellant in low Earth orbit.
3,000. Okay, why so high there?
Because that's the most difficult place to deliver mass to from the surface. The gravity well is steep. However, the price drops significantly as you move closer to potential sources. They would pay about $1,000 per kilogram at the Earth-Moon Lagrange Point 1, L1, which is a vital orbital waypoint.
A kind of cosmic gas station.
A cosmic gas station. And then a mere $500 per kilogram on the surface of the moon itself, assuming a local production source is established.
$500 per kilogram for water-based fuel on the moon. I mean, in this context, that sounds incredibly cheap. Why is the value on the moon surface lower than at L1?
It reflects the cost of handling and transport. If you mine the water on the moon, it still costs energy and infrastructure to launch it up to that L1 waypoint. The price differential indicates the logistics cost of lifting that water out of the moon's gravity well versus the tremendous cost of lifting it out of Earth's.
So what's the larger implication of these established price points? I mean, what does an established, valuable propellant market enable?
It creates an economic multiplier for the entire space ecosystem. Once a supplier can reliably provide propellant at these competitive prices in orbit or cislunar space, it dramatically reduces the economic barrier for everyone else.
Right.
Missions that were previously prohibitively expensive because they had to launch all their return fuel from Earth suddenly become viable. This enables complex, resource-intensive activities like deep space asteroid mining, the construction of massive lunar bases, or sustained Mars missions to move from the planning stage to the execution stage.
So the market for water is the key.
The existence of a proven, priced market for a basic resource like water confirms that ISRU is the indispensable, commercially viable linchpin for human exploration across the solar system.
So we have the hardware, we have the chemistry, and we have the economic incentive all pushing toward expansion. Now we hit the wall. The grinding regulatory friction back on Earth. This brings us back to the conflict we opened with, perfectly embodied in the legal system, which we've called the gavel and the clock.
This refers to that specific court ruling back in September, where Judge Carl Nichols ultimately threw out a lawsuit against the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA, regarding Starship operations. This legal action, brought by environmental advocates, really crystallized that up versus down conflict.
And the argument put forward by groups like the Center for Biological Diversity and the American Bird Conservancy was that this rapid disruptive space expansion, with its inevitable component of launch failures and explosions, was essentially trashing an irreplaceable corner of Texas.
Yeah, the language was, exploding rockets will keep raining down on imperiled wildlife, and they were using decades-old terrestrial environmental law as the primary tool to try and get an injunction against expansion.
And the counter-argument, the accelerationist position, is that this desire for perfect safety on the ground, which is mandated through endless legal and bureaucratic review, is a fatal gamble with the human extinction clock.
Exactly. From this perspective, the localized risk to a few acres of habitat is vastly outweighed by the existential risk of remaining a single plant species. The legal delay itself is seen as a form of stagnation, which is viewed as fatal because it slows the velocity of achieving multi-planetary resilience.
To understand the sheer scale of this friction, we need to dive into the specifics of the regulatory commitment required. Let's look at a concrete example. The Starship Super Heavy Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, that was prepared for the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station at SLC-37.
Right.
This document just demonstrates the enormous planning and investment required just to achieve regulatory compliance for expansion.
The proposed action is breathtaking in its scope. It reflects the necessity of establishing a rapid, redundant launch cadence. The EIS analyzed setting up operations at SLC-37 at Cape Canaveral, detailing a proposal to support up to 76 Starship Super Heavy launches annually.
76 launches?
Annually, along with 152 landings per year. That's 76 landings for the Super Heavy booster and 76 for the Starship upper stage.
76 launches a year from a single complex, plus double that in landing events. That's an immense throughput. What kind of industrial infrastructure is required to support that cadence at just one launch complex?
This is where we see the concept of the industrial mother machine applied to the launch site itself. The plan involves building dual, redundant systems for critical operations. 2 launch pads, 2 launch mounts, 2 integration towers, and 2 landing catch towers or test stands.
So redundancy is key.
It's essential for maintaining the high cadence. It ensures that maintenance or an anomaly at one pad doesn't stop the entire operation. But the real commitment is in the utility infrastructure needed to sustain the massive fuel production.
They aren't just shipping propellant in, they are manufacturing it on site.
They have to. The scale requires it. The plans include major utility infrastructure and the construction of massive propellant generation systems. This involves a methane liquefier to chill natural gas to cryogenic temperatures and a massive air separation unit, or ASU.
And ASU is basically a factory in itself.
It's an industrial chemical plant required to generate the enormous volumes of liquid nitrogen and liquid oxygen needed for launch and testing.
And the storage for all this.
The facility needs commodity storage size to support 2.3 launches at any given time. We're talking about tanks holding 16,500 tons of LOX, 6,500 tons of LN2, and 5,000 tons of liquid methane. To power all this, they need to connect to the existing Delta substation, which provides up to 250 megawatts of power, potentially supplemented by large battery banks like Tesla Megapacks.
So they're building an energy infrastructure to match their industrial one.
You have to. It's that energy theory of value in action right on the launch pad. The sheer environmental planning required for these industrial components alone is immense.
Let's talk specifically about the surprising logistical constraint of water demand. When you look at the raw numbers, the water requirements for thermal management are just staggering.
They really are. The deluge system, which blasts massive amounts of water onto the launch pad during ignition to suppress acoustic energy and divert the heat plume, requires a staggering 1.146 million gallons of potable water
Per launch.
per launch event. The plan dictates that this water has to be retained and reused in on-site ponds, but the initial demand for 76 launches annually is so substantial that the city of Cocoa is required, under the EIS analysis, to factor this water demand into their future water planning for the whole service area.
Wow. And the industrial components add their own strain to the local water systems, too.
Absolutely. The cooling towers for the air separation unit, for example, they require continuous evaporative cooling, using about 660 gallons of water per minute. That results in about 12.4 million gallons of wastewater annually. The methane liquefier adds another 5.3 million.
And that all has to be treated.
All of it has to be carefully characterized, retained, and treated on-site or hauled off-site, which necessitates stringent permitting and coordination with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. We are discussing a massive industrial undertaking that requires a complete overhaul of local utility and environmental logistics.
Okay, so after analyzing all of these detailed impacts, the infrastructure, the massive utility consumption, the socioeconomic changes, what does this exhaustive EIS conclude were the key adverse effects, even with all these mitigation efforts?
The document is meticulous in its mitigation. Most impacts on air quality, traffic, utilities are ultimately determined to be no significant impact after mitigation is applied. For instance, the projected net annual operational emissions of nitrogen oxides, NOx, were estimated at 570 tons per year.
Which sounds like a lot.
It is. That figure technically exceeds the Department of the Air. The conclusion was that an adverse impact was highly unlikely to materialize, but it still triggers an adaptive management strategy. They have to proactively monitor air quality throughout the operational phase, which just demonstrates the layers of regulatory compliance required.
Okay, so after dealing with 250 megawatts of power, 17 million gallons of wastewater, and exceeding the NOx threshold, what was the one identified potential significant combined effect that they couldn't completely mitigate away?
The only identified potential significant combined effect across all analyzed resources, when you factor in the existing massive launch cadence at Cape Canaveral and KSC, is human annoyance from noise.
Human annoyance from noise.
The total projected launch activity across the Eastern Range, which is already projected to hit 306 launches per year without Starship, combined with the 76 new super heavy launches, increases community annoyance in surrounding residential areas.
It brings us directly back to the activist with the decibel meter in the opening. The greatest physical friction is the sound of progress.
Exactly. And we need to look closely at the noise analysis, which includes sonic booms. Sonic booms are evaluated using peak overpressure, measured in pounds per square foot, or PS. The EIS notes that sonic booms above 2 PSF could affect older, more vulnerable historic buildings and bric-a-brac outside the base perimeter, specifically in nearby towns like Titusville and Rockledge, which often have structures built before modern hurricane and vibration codes.
Okay, but what's the statistical probability of damage from a sonic boom at that level?
The analysis deemed the probability of actual structural damage as exceedingly low. For a 2 PSF overpressure event, the statistical probability of window breakage ranges from about 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 1 million.
So it's a reportable risk, but it's tiny.
It's a potential adverse effect that must be reported, but the likelihood is remote. And critically, the historic properties within the base perimeter, like the 1962 Launch Control Center blockhouse at SLC 37, are expected to be completely unaffected because they're robust infrastructure designed for high vibration environments. The real concern is the annoyance factor and that remote possibility of damage to older private structures off base.
And what about the protected species, like the marine turtles that feature so prominently in the lawsuits?
The protected species mitigation is incredibly detailed. The most significant risk identified for marine turtles is not the acoustic shock of the launch itself, but potential disorientation from nighttime operational lighting.
The light.
Specifically, light leakage near nesting beaches, which affects about 4 acres of critical habitat. Mitigation requires implementing a strict lighting management plan to minimize those effects. But the overall biological determination with mitigation in place is that the action would not jeopardize the continued existence of any protected species.
So after analyzing air, water, power, and wildlife, the one major potential operational significant physical impact is on range management itself, just given the complexity of the scheduling.
This is a profound logistical point. The sheer cadence of up to 76 annual Starship launches creates a potential for significant impact on range management if the coordination and scheduling mitigations fail to deconflict the usage of the Eastern Range.
I mean, Space Launch Delta 45 has to manage all this.
And they have to prioritize national security missions and NASA civil launches, which are often non-negotiable on timing.
Managing a launch corridor with 382 total launches projected per year is not simply opening a calendar app.
It is a high-hazard, hyper-dense operational environment. To manage this unprecedented density, SLD-45 is utilizing sophisticated new software, the Stargate Web System. The system is designed specifically to streamline scheduling and operational management across all commercial, national security, and civil users. The system's necessity speaks to the complexity. The physical impact isn't the rocket explosion, it's the bureaucratic and logistical impossibility of coordinating that volume of high-hazard activity without advanced systems.
The challenge is institutional, not technical physics.
Exactly.
Which brings us full circle to the philosophical war between up and down. We've gone from the raw industrial ambition of Starship and the necessary Martian chemistry through the rigorous economics of lifetime embodied energy and finally into the grinding gears of regulatory friction, where the most significant identified combined operational impact is managing the logistics of a hyper-busy launch corridor.
And the most significant community concern is human annoyance from noise.
This deep dive has fully illuminated the three essential components of this up versus down war. First, we have the philosophical resistance, the psychological anchor, the insistence that humanity must remain in the resource-finite cradle of Earth.
A position that, when you view it through the lens of evolution and existential risk, is seen by accelerationists as fundamentally vulnerable.
Second, the absolute necessity of industrial independence. ISRU provides the chemistry to transform Martian waste into fuel and air, while the massive capacity of Starship delivers the foundries and power plants.
And the LEE metric provides the necessary objective economic framework to prove that this autonomy is not just possible, but the only truly sustainable path.
And third, the regulatory friction. The exhaustive environmental review process designed to ensure perfect safety on the ground, a process where the possibility of sonic boom damage to older structures outside the base perimeter demands years of review, rivaling the strategic imperative of achieving multi-planetary resilience. The conclusion we draw from examining all this is robust. The greatest challenge to becoming a multi-planetary species isn't mastering the physics of heavy lift or the chemistry of resource utilization. It is overcoming the psychological and bureaucratic insistence that humanity must remain an eternal infant, never allowed to pack its bags and move out.
The ethical consideration is clear. For a vulnerable, self-aware species, the moral imperative is to expand. The future hinges not on reaching perfect safety on Earth, but on maximizing the velocity of our escape from that single point of failure. The choice between the two mindsets, down or up, will determine whether humanity achieves infinite growth across the solar system or submits to planned obsolescence within the gravity well.